Okay, so we're going to start. Welcome everyone to this deeply important and highly anticipated masterclass on decolonizing the narrative. Today we gather to discuss the role of storytelling in shaping our understanding of the world, particularly through the lens of Palestinian culture and the ongoing struggle for justice and recognition. We are honored to have with us the founders of Watermelon Pictures, a film production and distribution company dedicated to amplifying underrepresented voices and challenging dominant narratives. Joining us here are Munir Atalla, a Palestinian-American filmmaker with roots in Jordan and Houston, whose investigative journalism has taken him across continents, and through Zoom, Alana Hadid, a passionate advocate for Palestinian voices, who's joining us via Zoom due to COVID. Unfortunately, we wanted you to be here with us in person, but I hope that, luckily the technology is saving us today. Thank you both for being here. As we begin, I want to start with a quote from Edward Said. He says that the power to narrate or to block other narratives from forming and emerging is very important to culture and imperialism and constitutes one of the main connections between them. So I guess this is something to reflect on through the conversation today, especially as we witness today. I think our generation, Generation X, Y, and Z, we're seeing something that is unprecedented. And we're seeing all this genocide in Gaza, and it's a stark reminder for us of the importance of telling, the narrative that we want the world to see, and reflecting justice and truth. So today we will explore with you what is it that you mean when you say that you want to decolonize the narrative, that you want to shed the light on stories that haven't been told before. And to start, I'd like to ask you to kind of take us through a definition, or a working definition of what Watermelon Pictures is. And I'd also like to, because both you, Munir, and Alana are of Palestinian ancestry, and I think it's very important, especially with the slogan of the festival this year, احكيلي, tell me, that you tell us your story. Like, how did you, as people with this kind of ancestry or heritage, decided that this is the kind of project that you want to work on and pursue?
Thank you so much, Fadi. It's so nice to be here in Amman, in a city that I love so much and consider my home as well. And to just see such a wonderful audience here with us today, and to be at a festival that really represents an industry that has been hard fought and won here in Amman. So I'm really, really honored and proud to be here. Thank you for the question. I know Alana's going to have a really great answer to this, so I don't want to take up too much time from her, but my story is that I was raised here. I graduated from school here, and I went to the States to study and work as a journalist. I went on to work at companies like Netflix, produce films for A24, and kind of just hustle in the grind of the New York film scene. When in October, everything sort of shifted. Alongside the film work that I've been doing, I've always also been involved in activism in some way or another for Palestine, which started in university with Students for Justice in Palestine. And it's really cool to see that that's come full circle in a way. I now teach at Columbia University as well, and I was on the lawn in the encampments with my students just this semester, witnessing them, the generational shift that you were just discussing. So Watermelon Pictures kind of comes out of that moment in time where it felt like what generations of Palestinians have been struggling for was now suddenly able to be invested back into our own community, back into our own stories. And so Watermelon Pictures has been launched out of an existing distribution company called MPI Media Group, which is a company that was founded by Palestinians in the 1970s. Alana, maybe you can talk about the story of the Ali family a little bit. But we're backed by this company that's now managed by two Palestinian brothers, and which has enabled us to have the resources to launch a distribution company and label for Palestinian films. Now, we can talk about what distribution means and sort of how the industry is structured in the US, but I'd love to first hear from Alana, and yeah, thank you again, everyone, for being here.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah. So I think Munir wants you to answer the question related to your story. I mean, you come from a family that is like a trademark, right? You have the fame, but you also invest your fame in activism, particularly regarding the Palestinian cause. So tell us your story. Like what brought you to this project, and how did or have your background and your experience as a daughter of a Palestinian man who left in the 1948 brought you to Watermelon Pictures?
Sure. I first want to say thank you, and thank you everyone for hearing me over Zoom. And I'm a little sick, so excuse me if I'm not as on point as I usually am, but I'm going to do my best. My father was ethnically cleansed in 1948, obviously, along with his parents and my aunts, a few of my aunts, not all of them. But it's been important to us to tell our story from the beginning, to constantly talk about Palestine, about the forcible expulsion of over 750,000 people, Palestinians from historic Palestine. When I met the Ali brothers, it was because of my brother's film that he did with Vinar Fuso called Walled Off. So they were looking for distribution, much like many other Palestinian films. There is limited distribution, limited production. Not very many people feel like touching that subject. And they found MPI, a Palestinian-led distribution company, and Hamza and Badia, the amazing brothers who are leading MPI, had made a decision that they wanted to focus on Palestinian voices and on making sure that the narrative that we've been telling, that we know, that Palestinians and Arabs know in our heart, was told to the rest of the world. And so out of that came Watermelon Pictures. And, I jumped at the chance to be a part of it, I think, as Munir did as well. And we were really proud to be able to be a part of a project that was, reframing this narrative and really telling the stories that have been told for so long, but not been widely heard. So I think that's kind of the, Watermelon Pictures in a nutshell.
Yeah, amazing. I know, Munir, you wanted to maybe tell us a little bit about what Watermelon as a distribution, especially that not a lot of people know what distribution means in the context of especially the American market in the West, also in other countries where there are territories and there are certain studios that kind of monopolize the work. So please tell us where does Watermelon Picture work fit into that?
Yeah, thank you. Distribution has so often in the industry been kind of the wall that so many of our films and any really politically radical or ambitious projects, the wall that they hit. Because the distribution companies in the industry are really run by people who are, they're corporations that don't like to go against the grain, that are run by people who are profiting from the current system and often aligned with it. So what we were very lucky to have in this formation of Watermelon is an existing distribution company that was established. It's gone 50 years distributing all sorts of movies, from horror films to comedies to documentaries, at a international level, with a focus on North America. That was willing to put all of their financial and political capital behind a Palestinian label, to say, no matter what cost befalls our business from this, we're going to basically put our weight behind it. And so it started off with us thinking that we would just take a few Palestinian films. There are so many great movies out each year that are produced, but then they're never taken to market, because that's the role of a distribution company. It's to take the films and get them into theaters using relationships with booking agents, with theater bookers, get the films onto platforms using contracts and deals that already exist between distribution companies and those platforms, and kind of just bypass the gatekeepers of the industry and enable our stories to basically just meet the audience that we know is waiting for it. We know and we see on the streets literally masses of people who are standing with us, who want more of our stories, and even people who are not on the streets with us but are curious to learn more. We know that these audiences exist, and we've been blocked out of the industry. I think the Edward Said quote that you mentioned, the power to block narratives from being told, is really what we're trying to most directly challenge. So that's kind of the role of the distribution company and how Watermelon fits into that.
And of course, also producing content, because it's going to be like one side of the work that you produce and also that you distribute. You don't necessarily need to distribute the work you have produced, right? So you're also willing to take projects that you haven't produced.
That's right. That's right. So now we're starting to develop and produce films based on. Now that we've started releasing films, we're seeing what's effective, we're seeing what works, we're starting to understand and sort of nurture new audiences for our stories and our content. And in doing so, we're now able to take that know-how and that knowledge and say, okay, proactively, this is what we want, this is what we need more of. It's going to be politically uncompromising, of course, but it's also going to be entertaining and reach a mass market audience, because we don't want to be making films that are sidelined, that are only existing in like a small art house space, that are preaching to a choir. No, we want to move beyond that. But at the same time, that's not to say that our main audience isn't our own community. We want to be making films that are going to energize our own community and mobilize them. Because our community, though we kind of know a lot of what's going on and we're consuming it on our phones on a daily basis, that doesn't necessarily translate into action. That doesn't necessarily translate into political commitment or motivation. And that's what we're trying to tap into with our own community.
I'd like to, that's a nice segue here, because you mentioned the audiences, and I would like to ask more specifically about the target audience. There are like, and we're at a time, again, unprecedented, so there's a lot of, people are generally and rightfully polarized and tense. And people are reacting in two different ways, as I've observed. Some people are seeing hope in the fact that a lot of young people, Gen Z, are for the first time able to be on the side of this cause. And that's a change. That's a huge change. But there are also, and I'm talking about Gen Z in the West and people in the West, like students movements, and so on. But there are other people who are more nihilistic or cynical about expecting anything from the West. You guys are based in the West. You have like one foot here, one foot there. You're going to produce films, for probably like filmmakers that are also, between here and there. Are you targeting with your work to like continue to change the opinions of people outside in the West in order to kind of create like change in the geopolitics, or is your target audience people in this part of the world or people who are already on this side who have never seen stories that tell their own narrative? Like which is your priority amongst these two?
I could take this.
Yeah,
I think both. And I think when it comes to, this word has become such a bad word, but to, normalizing our narrative, to bringing our narrative into, normal conversation for people to feel like it's something that they can talk about. We not only have to, change that narrative for the West, but also, to allow people who have been hearing it for so long for it to be not something that they're just constantly seeing in documentaries or, like the sad story. I think that it's important that we target, and I talk about this a lot, the soft power of Western entertainment is important. The reason why the narrative of, the way that Arabs have been looked at in entertainment is because it's been normalized within Western entertainment, and we're constantly seen as as the bad guy because of how small additions to movies have made people see us. And it's the reason, and this translates into how people can get away with things like what's happening right now in Gaza. Because as you normalize the idea of, Arabs as the bad guy, it allows people to look past, oh, well, I've seen them, in this movie, in this TV show my entire life as being that. Then I can, now look past what's happening to this part of the world. And so I think not only are we trying to change the narrative within entertainment, but I think that subsequently that power of changing that narrative and normalizing that narrative will eventually have a larger impact on the way that people see it and the way that they subsequently, come out and protest or vote. Or stand up to their governments in order to protect people that they feel deserve protection. And so it's a small microcosm of what's necessary in order to change the way that people look at this part of the world in general. And so we're trying to do that, but at the same time, we're trying to have representation. We want to represent our community. We want to make sure that our community is represented correctly with all the, the spectrum of what a human is in, an Arab human. We're sad, we're happy, we're in love. We have all the things that everyone else has in the world, and we want to show that as well. So I think it's part of representation and also part of a larger movement towards, making sure that people understand us.
Yeah, I think that was so beautifully put, Alana. Thank you. And the only thing I would add is also that I really encourage the filmmakers and artists here to think about us not as a company that's going to come and dictate what films should look like or what films to make. A lot of the films that we've already taken and distributed are things that we could have never have even conceived of, Waldorf and Israelism, and now, there's one of the directors is here with us today. I won't say much more, but has a film that was unbelievably visionary and incredible that we couldn't have possibly come up with in such a short amount of time. But that's why we're really here to empower the artists from our region, from our diaspora, to tell the stories that they think are the most urgent. And all we can promise is that when they come to us with those ideas, we want to embrace them, we want to develop them together, we want to talk about how to make them work in the models that we have to work within as an industry. And for us, that's the North American sort of consumer market. For others, it's the European co-production model. But that's not to say that those models are perfect. And part of, I think, decolonizing this whole industry is birthing new models that are going to be able to sustain artists, able to sustain our filmmakers in ways that actually enable new types of films to get made. Because this is part of the evolution of the industry. And we are hoping that by building an institution that is able to kind of generate this revenue for filmmakers and artists, generate this publicity, excitement, clout, whatever you want to call it, this soft power, as Alana put it, that's going to help our artists really take the stage, take the spotlight. And we just want to be sort of a platform for that.
That's great, and it's quite ambitious. God bless you. I mean, like, we need that for sure. But it's also like I can think of the challenges of doing that, especially creatively. You're a filmmaker, so I'd like you to maybe touch on that. Like, there's this critical balance that you have to strike between telling a story that is. That tells the right, narrative that you want, but also that is entertaining. There's an influx of, news. I know a lot of people who are muting news from their social media because they don't want to see any of that. In the past years, maybe not during this time, but I know that a lot of Palestinian filmmakers, for example, wanted to tell stories that have nothing to do with war or with the struggle, about people living their daily life and so on. But when you say that, I'm thinking of how can we strike a balance to tell a story that tells the world something that they haven't seen before, but also entertaining. There's this sensationalized media scene. There are trends that you have to also keep in mind. So how do you maybe not as a producer, as a filmmaker, how do you ensure that you have this balance in your work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think we definitely want to be centering Gaza in this moment, and I think part of what we're working on is we're working with filmmakers on the ground there, with some of the storytellers, journalists on the ground there, to take the stories that deserve or call to be made in feature format, in like a documentary feature or a narrative feature, and develop those and bring them to the world. Having said that, I think there's also this, historically within Palestinian cinema, we've seen a lot of films that, just to take a step back, we're one of the most propagandized about people in the world. There's more money spent making propaganda about Palestinians than, the GDP of a small nation. So it's understandable that so much of what we make is kind of trying to dispel that propaganda, right? But what ends up happening with content like that is that for our own community, well, we already see through the propaganda, and we don't necessarily need to be told or explained to the things that are happening or why we're doing the things that we're doing. On the other hand, these films are kind of made for mainstream audiences or to teach mainstream audiences about our struggle. The problem is it's not that easy to get people to sit down for a lesson. Nobody wants to feel like they're being condescended to, or even educated is like a bad word in so much of our media culture. That's how bad it's gotten. But dealing with the current situation, trying to make the most impact, we're forced to think of new creative ways to reach audiences and provide them with entry points into our stories, into our struggle. That's not to say that we're ever going to be politically compromising. It's the opposite. We want our struggle and the honest reality of our people and our history to be central to everything that we do. But if we approach it through a sports documentary instead of through a documentary, then why not? That allows us to reach new audiences. If we do it through an animated children's movie that gives both our children something to celebrate while also educating new generations about our culture, then that's a victory for us as well. That shifts people's narrative and shifts the way that they're seeing us. So we're looking for stuff that uses genre, uses creative storytelling to just reach these audiences and different pockets that we haven't been able to reach before. And we think that by doing that, our own community is actually going to be more excited by that because we're just telling great, entertaining stories that are still rooted in our struggle, rather than trying to do that sort of reverse propaganda.
Great. Alana, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I mean, I don't think I could have said it any better. So,
So let's talk about the authenticity of representation, which is a big challenge to filmmakers, especially in the current paradigm where filmmakers want to get funded, by certain, funds in the West, and they aspire to have their films, presented on certain platforms or film festivals. And this is not going to change, right? I mean, like, you're presenting a new model, but you're still functioning within that paradigm. So how would you help, the filmmakers or the storytellers that you work with in order to tell stories with authentic representation, something that resonates with who they are, but also that can actually reach the bigger audience beyond like the people that already know the representation?
I think that to answer that, the way that films, let's think about film and what it is. It's a very relatively young medium. Movies haven't been around for that long, and in order to make them, they require massive amounts of resources and capital, for the most part, right? So it is it comes out of the West, and it is an inherently colonial medium in a way that, those with more capital and more resources are going to be able to create more films and create films of higher production value, right? So to think about how we approach that and sort of try to decolonize it, we have to literally be seizing the means of production, right? And democratizing it in some way. And what's happened in the West is there's been an entire industry built around cinema, right? And this cinema translates into soft power, whether it's Hollywood pushing their narrative of war and imperialism, or even white supremacy, white beauty standards, etc., or whether it's the European model, which is a little more art house and more cinematic, right? These institutions fund only certain versions of our stories, or only versions of them that benefit their power structure, right? Even the ones that claim to be subversive or telling a raw emotional story from our region, oftentimes just want us to basically bring forth our suffering and air our dirty laundry so that a European audience can consume it and feel educated and feel good about themselves. So to me, I mean, I propose basically a sort of reorientation as much as possible within our industry, not towards pandering to these institutions and hoping for their accolades, hoping for their money, but rather building our own power, which really is at its most ambitious what Watermelon is trying to do, but also reorienting towards the global South. I think that's something that we've really seen Palestine give us as a global community, is this notion that actually, obviously, our allies are not in the West. Obviously, these power structures are never going to benefit us. And we should be looking instead to our allies in South Africa, in East Asia, in the populations of other Arab countries. Notice that I said populations, not others. So I look at the South Korean model, and I think this is this is an industry that was built up. Who here loves K-pop? Who here has witnessed this incredible cultural output from South Korea? This is yes, Alana too. This is what we need to be investing in. This is something that takes generations, right? And it comes from both governments realizing that actually investing in soft power is in large part more effective and more important than investing in so-called hard power, but also in our own people who have access to capital. If you're here and you have access to capital, it's our duty to be, if you're not able to be politically active in the place where you are, which for a lot of us, there are restraints, we're organizing under certain conditions, right? It's our obligation to take those resources and channel them towards this kind of cultural output, right? To support our filmmakers. It's shameful that some of our most talented directors, our super established filmmakers, should ever have a project that doesn't receive the funding that it needs to receive, and that we're having to go to Europe and ask for co-production money from the French government or from the British government or from the Canadian. I mean, that's, we should be funding our own stories, and we should be, very choosy about who our allies are. Yeah.
That's great. Sorry, Alana, do you like
No, I
to
was
add
just
to
going to
that?
say, to kind of piggyback on what Munir just said, I think it's super important. Obviously, there's a lot of emphasis right now on boycotting and divesting, and I think that's incredibly important. But we also need to think about investing, and where we are investing our attention, our funds. It's I think that what's important is, if we're going to decolonize any industry, it is right now, we live in a capitalistic world. Until we can change that, we're in a position where our money goes and our attention goes is where everything flows. There's a reason why the CIA had a office in Hollywood, because it was important to them to make sure that their narrative was told in a way that made audiences feel that the America and all of these this military industrial complex was the good guy. So it's because of the way that money is invested, the way that attention is invested, and so us having this knowledge and knowing that it's important means that we need to invest in shifting that, and it requires us decentralizing the spaces in which we have that attention comes from, and that money comes from as well. So yeah, I think Munir put it perfectly, but that's just my other 2 cents.
That's great, and you touched a little bit on funding, which is a very critical issue that filmmakers have to deal with, and that affects the narratives that they have, because like a lot of them, I noticed that from speaking to people who are writing projects, and even if you don't want to, you always have to think of the fact that you will get your money from somewhere, that also needs to impact the way you tell your story, and you're hoping and working to change that, but unless you want to fund independently, then you'll have this kind of autonomy over the narrative. Otherwise, there should be more sources. And then a lot of people, when this was announced, a lot of people told me or asked me to ask you, where are you going to get the money from? Because that's a big question that answers a lot of concerns, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I mean, I think it's a great question, and it's a question we always need to ask. And look, when I'm talking about European funds and things, I'm not saying that we should never, accept that money, or that, of course, it's incredibly difficult to get a film made these days. And a lot of times we're going to need to go to a huge diversity of sources to get that money. For us, we are trying to tap into the North American theatrical and, VOD, or video on demand market. It's the biggest, market for films in the world. And we feel strongly that there is a market now, a growing market, a generation that is energized to learn about Palestine, support Palestinian stories, and a diaspora of Arabs, Muslims, people of color who see the Palestinian struggle as core to the fight against global imperialism. So we have enough people like that we feel will rent these films on various platforms, that will go to the theaters and buy tickets in order to fund the development of more films. The thing about Watermelon is we're not a charity, right? We're not, and there's a reason for that, because we don't want to have to necessarily answer to big donors. But at the same time, if we're able to make these films profitable in the North American market, every cent of what Watermelon makes is going to be reinvested into Palestinian content. So, we just started a few months ago, so give us a little bit of time, but, we're trying to be a company that is profitable, and that will be able to fund the development and production of future films. Now, it takes time to reach that, but we're also exploring some alternate models that we're really excited about, but maybe it's a little too early to sort of talk about them. And we're also trying to put together a film fund of sorts. I think that there is enough time, there is enough energy right now, and the desire to fund these projects that we would be able to assemble such a thing. But yeah, Alana, anything to add to that?
We're working on it, and I think just like anything, we're listening to our community, but from what they want, but we're also taking from, MPI has been, our kind of parent company has been around since the 70s. We are relatively new, but working within, a business that has, been established for a very long time. So we're working, within things that we're trying to break out of, but for right now, we're trying to, use what we know to raise funds and make sure that we're a community and a place where people know that we're never going to tell you that the subject is too racy for us, is too touchy. But we're trying to figure out, exactly where we want to bring that money in from. So, we're on this journey just like everyone else.
If I can just add something as well, I think that part of what we're trying to do with working sort of inside and outside the industry at the same time is build the financial case for taking Palestinian content and content about Palestinians. Because a lot of distributors, a lot of producers, a lot of the industry is not necessarily so diametrically opposed to us. They're more just thinking, this is something too complicated, this is something too confusing, I'm going to get a lot of backlash for this, let's just play it safe, right? Now, we want to make the case that, well, actually our projects are not just, politically principled, they have a huge audience, they have a huge following, they have a movement backing them, and they have people that are going to loyally come out and buy tickets, rent movies, fill theaters, and champion these films through word of mouth and to their friends, so that these companies start saying, oh, well, we're missing out here, and we're missing out on a huge market, we're missing out on a huge audience. And then by being forced to come to us rather than us go to them, we're able to dictate the terms of our sort of involvement, arrangement, content, and share it sort of on our terms, and proceed accordingly.
Yeah. That's amazing. I think maybe let's talk about Waldorf, because that's a project that you have out now. And maybe Alana, because you're also, Anwar is your brother, and I think you can tell us about, having this project become like the poster of Watermelon. I think now if you go on the website, you find Waldorf, and everyone is like associating these two initiatives, the film and the company. Another thing about Waldorf is that it's a project that brought a lot of people from different backgrounds, like you mentioned, South Africa. We have Kweku Mandela, we have Walter Rogers, in addition to Vin and Anwar. So what is the importance of having a film with such like a transcultural, experience? How does this become, like the film that, represents what Watermelon Pictures is?
Well, I think what was important about Waldorf is that it was the beginning of what, we thought was important. It was a film that had been made over a number of years. I believe that Vin started making the film in 2018, and as well, was backed by, as you said, so many people from so many different backgrounds that believed that the conversation around Palestine wasn't being had and needed to be had. And I think what is beautiful about Waldorf is that, I always say it's the most digestible documentary for Gen Z, especially. It shifts between stories very quickly. It has kind of a social media feel to it. But the information is so important, so well done. It is the kind of documentary that I think is a generation, a new generation where, they're are Gen Z's brains don't necessarily work as the same way that a lot of other people's do. You need to digest information very quickly, but the way that it's been done, and centering around the Waldorf Hotel, Banksy's hotel in Bethlehem, and I think it's important. Vin also, constantly states, people have always asked, like, why Banksy, why the Waldorf Hotel? And he said, because I knew that Western audiences would pay attention to a documentary about Banksy and not necessarily about Palestine. And so he had decided, decidedly had decided that this film needed to have something that would appeal to Western audiences. We want to kind of use that idea where, you can either use, like, we don't want you to have to necessarily have to work outside of the idea that you can just talk about Palestine. But we thought that it was very interesting that he did that, and as well that he made this film, pre-October. This was a film that was made 2018, 19, and 20. So it spoke to this idea that this conversation didn't start in October. It started very much before that, and we thought it was kind of emblematic of what's going on and what's been going on. I think it was important to do a film like this, a documentary like this.
Nice. And before we open the floor for questions from the audience, I think, at least for me now, I understand what you are doing now, what you're planning to do in the near future. But let's take a moment and look, to the best case scenario in the future, where Palestinian liberations becomes a reality. Where do you see your mission evolving in that kind of scenario?
Oh, so you're talking about a couple of months from now, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I mean, our huge ambition is for Watermelon to be a project that uses Palestine as its North Star, but just uses those values of liberation, of anti-colonial sort of anti-imperial struggle to take us to other movements. We're not bound to just talking about Palestine. We want to be doing films about Sudan, about Black Lives Matter, about indigenous resistance around the world. There, unfortunately, will always be, I think, a space for that kind of content. Trust me, even at post-liberation, there will be Palestinian stories to tell and share as well. Yeah.
Alana, where do you envision Watermelon Pictures to be in, let's say, 30 years?
In 30 years? Yeah. Oh, I mean, I want us to be, a household name. I want people to say Watermelon Pictures like they say, and excuse me, but like Fox or Miramax, A24. I think what we want to be is so embedded in culture that no one even thinks about the fact that we are, reframing. We're just doing what we always do, and kind of, and I hate using this word, but like normalize, where people feel very comfortable talking about Palestine and associating it with Watermelon Pictures. I also hope that we are not, we aren't alone, that there are, especially in North America. I'm not saying that we're alone in the world, because there's so many amazing Arab-led film companies, but I want us to not be alone in North America, that there are more of us in the West, especially. So I want us to be the kind of start of a community in the West in this industry that is championing our voices.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have to wrap up the conversation, although it's very inspiring. Thank you, Alana, for being with us despite not feeling great today. I hope you get better soon. And thank you,
Thank you
Munir,
for
for your presence. Let's have a round of applause, please, for our guests. I'm sure we all had so many questions, but we're about to get kicked out of the theater because there's a film afterwards. Thank you so much. Thank you for the audience for engaging with our guests with your insightful questions. And hopefully, best wishes for Watermelon Pictures and for more movements that aim to bring in like new blood and new narrative to stories about injustice. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank you.
Good night.